right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Strong Roots, Stronger Growth, Integrating Operating Disciplines with Financial Strategy for Sustainable Success, proudly sponsored by Resources Lumber. So this session is about aligning your operational discipline with strong financial strategy to build efficient, resilient, and adaptable businesses. You'll hear how to leverage an entrepreneurial operating framework, enrich leadership meetings with meaningful financial insights, set measurable quarterly priorities, and strengthen your company's ability to weather challenges like tariffs and market shifts. So I'm excited to introduce today's speakers. We have Dallin Brooks, Executive Director of NHLA. Dallin offers insight into the unique operational challenges and opportunities facing the hardwood industry and how strong structure and discipline can improve resilience across our sector. And we also have Ryan Walter, Managing Director of Pro CFO Partners. Ryan is passionate about organizational transformation and growth, ensuring businesses get the strategic financial leadership they need to achieve their goals and desired outcomes. We'll leave plenty of time at the end for questions. And as a reminder, our next ed session, Reading the Market, What Today's Trends Mean for the Hardwood Industry, will be in the same room at 10:45 tomorrow morning. Before we dive in, a quick reminder, after this session, please take a moment to rate the presentation. There'll be a QR code on the very last slide that you can scan. Your feedback helps us make future sessions even more valuable. Let's go ahead and get started. Dallin, you ready?
Yes. So we had another speaker that was supposed to be here, Ryan Henry, and unfortunately he was unable to make it. So I'm going to cover a little bit of what he was going to add. And this is in no way, shape, or form a sales pitch. This is sharing with you our experience, actually from the NHLA perspective. Because I came to the NHLA 3 years ago and immediately recognized the need within the NHLA for more structure. I am a fly by the seat of my pants kind of guy. According to the books, they call that a visionary. And you need somebody to be more of an integrator, the doer who actually gets things done. I just say, get it done. Why haven't you got it done yet? I told you yesterday. And you need some organizational structure in order to handle all these different things. And throughout that process and telling my chiefs and the staff to get things done, it became obvious that we needed some structure and format for this. And so I sent Desiree Freeman, our controller, onto a quest to find a system that the NHLA could adopt to help us to create processes. And I was focused simply on the process factor. And Desiree came to me with a book called Traction. And I'm not plugging the book. That was what Ryan was supposed to do, and he's not here. So the book talked about creating very simple entrepreneurial operating system. So that's what EOS stands for, entrepreneurial operating system. And it's designed for small businesses, not designed for associations. So I can tell you right off the bat, it's really hard for NHLA to implement this because we have not one product or a widget that we're selling, but we have a number of services that are directed to us by the board. We set prices based on board direction. So I don't have as much control over things as EOS would like us to have, but it's a great system for creating processes, creating several different models. And there's 6 main core pieces to this, sorry. And I'm just going to give you a brief explanation of them all. The reason we're here together is because Pro CFO and I have done some work together. They've also been very helpful. Obviously, chief financial officers are such a key part of any business, and more our lives today are being run by bean counters, right? I think that's what we say behind their backs.
You can say in front of our backs too. Okay.
Just being honest, right? This is how it works. Everything's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. The margins are getting tighter, and the more we pay attention to this, the more we can react to it positively and get ahead of ourselves. The EOS model has 6 components. One, of course, is creating the vision, is making sure you have it. And I'll get into that a little bit in some of my slides here and talk about the vision for the NHLA and what we did to create it. Number 2 is the data, right? If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And that's the number one thing, right? We all sort of know that lesson, that you got to measure it so you can improve it. And so obviously you're going to have data. And then the process. and how to get things done. And it's the 80-20 rule, but it's not the 80-20 rule of, 80% of the people do 20% of the work or 20% do 80% of the work. This is the rule of basically you have to have at least 80% of your process done by creating those small, simple processes. Because if you create 20%, you can cover 80. And that's really the key thing on the processes is getting your key processes done, and then you can create operating procedures from that. Traction is just doing it again and again. People is right people in the right seats, right? Getting the right people doing the right job, making sure that they can perform it and they have the talent and the ability to do it, that they get it, that they want to do it, so that they're happy coming to work, and that they're capable of doing it. And then issues is really, for us, it's how to solve your issues, because every business has issues. This is the main focus for the NHLA. We have nothing but issues. I feel like some of you guys might want to solve some of my issues. Feel free to come up to me afterwards and tell me, and I'll put it on my agenda for next time. The other thing that the NHLA has done is create another system where we said, hey, okay, we got to tackle all these things. We got to get the right people in the right seats. How do we do it? And so we went out and actually created or used a software called Predictive Index. And some of you have done these personality type softwares where you ask 5 or 6 questions and it tells you all about your personality, and it probably nails you right on unless you lied because you didn't want to admit that you actually do things this way. But the personality software really helps us create a profile. It actually says there, that I'm a captain, and I don't think you guys can read it from back there because it's not as big as I'd like it to be. But, it tells you, here's some warnings, here's some different things how to work with. This is the type of leadership qualities this person has and everything like that. And it helps us so that when I'm dealing with Natalie and John and Dana, Desiree at my meetings, I know, okay, Desiree needs time to process this because she's analytical. And so I need to give her time to say, okay, here's how we're doing this. And so putting these all together has really helped us to be a more cohesive team and to create different attributes of this. So these are just the things that the NHLA is doing. If you have any questions about them, I'm happy to talk about it. But for us, it really comes down to how is the NHLA functioning on a higher level? How can I raise the bar, right? As you just saw in today's keynote, everybody's costing us more, prices are going up, and we have to still be competitive and we have to do more with less. And so we've come up with, through the EOS system, and Predictive Index helps us implement it all, a scorecard so that everyone has a number, right? It goes back to the data. So everybody has a weekly task. What is it done? How does it get measured? How do we make sure that we're compensating and knowing that this is getting done and this is our core thing? And I'll show you my scorecard in just a second so you can say, hey, Dallin didn't do that. But we'll share it with you. Another thing is knots, and we call them knots. Traction, the book calls them rocks. Somebody else calls them quarterly goals. But really what they are is, hey, what do we have to accomplish in this next 3 months that's critical to the NHLA, that's critical to your business, so that we can attack that on a short-term basis? Because if you sit there and say, well, that's a goal for next year, or that's a goal for the entire year, at 6 months in, you're like, hey, are we on tack? Well, I'll start that goal sooner or later. 3-month goals really helps keep things in perspective and keeps us moving the NHLA forward at the right thing. It really has helped us to get closer to our goals and start aligning our goals better and working together as a team as we set these goals together as a leadership team within the NHLA. So all the chiefs and I sit down each quarter and set these goals for ourselves and really help us to do that. Right people, right seats. This is an interesting one because as soon as you start talking with people about their abilities to do things and start saying, hey, we have certain jobs that have to be done and who's the right person to do it, it actually caused quite a bit of stir and turmoil in the NHLA, and we had quite a bit of turnover. So we started this last August. So I've been doing this for a full year now, and once we start talking about right people, right seats, and whether or not they get it, want it, and have the capability to do it, and all these different job description scorecards, some people didn't like that. They didn't like being measured. They wanted to be able to do what they wanted. There wasn't a lot of accountability within the NHLA structure when I came on board, and so we started to create that. Some people liked it because they liked, hey, now I know exactly what's expected of me. And other people are like, no, I don't want that, and didn't want to be held accountable to certain numbers. And so it became a turnover issue. So we had quite a few people change within the NHLA, if you haven't noticed that in the staff that are here today. And then the L10 meeting, the L10 stands for level 10. It just means at the end of every meeting that I have with my staff, we rate the meeting. And that means I'm completely on the hook for how good that meeting was each week. Because if everybody sits there and says it's a 4, that means I didn't do a very good job of running the meeting and getting it done right. because we all can sit there and say we've had too many wasted meetings, right? How many times have you had that production meeting where it's the same thing over and over again, and somebody's sitting there on their phone doing something or on their computer? And so every time at the end of every meeting, we rate it. We just had our best rated meeting last week. It was great. Everybody rated it an 8. I'm finally like in an A. That's a B? In Canada, it's an A. 80% in Canada, that's A. So like it was nice to like finally, we all have been trying to improve our meetings to be more efficient, more productive, to really get things moving, and having an open discussion at the end of the meeting about how effective that meeting was. Really, it makes you try to improve the meeting. And so it's been a great thing for us. We use predictive index to run our meetings because it sets everything up for us. So we've created this, and then we have this thing in the EOS system called IDS, which is identify, discuss, and solve. And we try to identify the issue that's the biggest priority, so that we don't just sit there and tackle things that don't really matter, right? We got to go through what's the critical thing that we have to discuss and solve it today. So I'm just going to show you the NHLA example, and this is really just sort of opening things up to you. So I'm just being forthright, because the only way to learn is to sit there and say, hey, we have struggled with this. Everything on here should be green. If it's green, that meant they met their goal, right? If it's not green, that means they're not achieving their goal. So we have this all set up in an Excel file, and every week we put in whether or not we achieve that goal. And what does that mean, right? And you ideally want to see all green. I'm close. What is it? And if you can't read that my green is to talk to a board member each week. And my goal is at least one a week. And the reason for that is because I have to start communicating more with the NHLA board. And we all sat down and said, everybody on the board is complaining that we don't hear enough from Dallin. And I'm like, okay, that's a scorecard, right? That's a goal. If everybody wants to hear more from me, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make sure I'm talking to more. And I see like 4 board members in here, so I'm going to get 4 today. But the point is, find the number. What is it that needs to be done? Where is it that we have to go and work after? And not all of them are all the time. For instance, this one here at the bottom is convention registrations. And obviously convention closes today. This week, we don't have to have convention registrations and won't open up again to April. So our scorecard changes all the time based on, hey, right now we're working on convention. Now we're working on a publication. Now we're working on this. We're constantly changing our scorecard. But the intent is to make sure that there's a measurable number for every department and for every chief that we're working towards, and then they all have their own scorecards within their departments as well. So this is just for the chiefs, and then each team has their own scorecard that we set up, and if you want to ever get a sample of what we've done, we can happily do that. The knots, this is a big thing for us, and this is our quarterly knots. These are right here. I'm showing you what our quarterly knots are for September to December 5th, when we have our next meeting, because that's when we set it up, right? End the year without a deficit. That's my quarterly knot. I'm off track. And we sit there in each meeting, each week, we say, are we on track or off track? So achieve $50,000 in new membership dues, John Hester, and he's on track for that right now. Increase membership retention, 90 to 95%, Natalie, she's on track. We are finding our priorities. These are the things we have to work on, and we're setting these goals and we're working towards it, because it's important that each quarter, hey, this is our priority right now. This has to improve. Membership retention has been really hard for us this last 9 months really, this year, because of so many businesses struggling. And so we're focusing on that more. And so this is how adaptive we are to the issues and when things happen. Again, I already talked about the right people and right seats. This is the NHLA structure. If you haven't seen it, I just thought it was nice to show you. I feel like we finally have the right people in the right seats here at the NHLA, and are excited to be going forward with all that. So that is just a quick overview of what we've set up and how we've benefited from this, because it's helped us have the structure. You can ask Bucky or any of the board members after next month when they have the next board meeting if they think we're really making effective change. I'll be honest with you, as the visionary and the one saying, hey, get this done, it's been hard that it hasn't been done faster. You want everything done tomorrow. But we've just promoted Desiree Freeman to become our Chief Financial and Operation Officer, and she's taking over the interior operations of the NHLA so that I can focus more on the exterior things and get out there and do the work that needs to be done to help the industry advance farther. And this all comes about because we've been able to implement this to say, here's now how we get this done and how we do it better. And so we've really been able to take the NHLA to another level in terms of our operational performance. It's not easy. There's a lot of questions about it, but we're working very hard to create and have structure so that everybody knows what their job is, so that everybody's doing their job and being held accountable for that job, and then setting goals to improve it and keep expanding the NHLA so that we can go forward more. So just wanted to share that with you from the NHLA perspective of how important it is to have these processes, to have a scorecard, to have a number, to have the data, to have the right people in the right seats. It makes a large difference for every organization, and it certainly has for the NHLA. So thank you very much.
So first, I'd like to thank you all for having me. That's as Texas as I can get with y'all. I'm from Pennsylvania, so we believe the word water has a D in it. So I'll try my best to ingratiate with everybody here, but thank you for having us. And actually, I do want to, at Pro CFO Partners, we actually use EOS ourselves, and again, it's not a commercial for EOS. I think you have to have a framework, whatever it is, in how you go about approaching particularly those big, audacious goals you're trying to achieve. You got to make sure everybody's aligned and everybody's rowing the boat in the same direction and knows what matters the most. So I think now what you covered is really critical there. We're going to get into finance stuff, and I know that's what drew everybody here. It's like everybody's favorite subject. I promise you it's not about spreadsheets. We're not going to be getting into the details of finance. What we're going to talk more about is its focus on momentum, and its focus on making sure your wheels are spinning and you're not missing a spoke as you move forward. That's kind of really critical to what we want to talk about here. We heard a little bit earlier about the kind of the vision and the knots. And we're going to, I think this really comes back to the broader topic of we need to be thinking out practically, we need to be thinking about where we're trying to go. And, in order to achieve those truly big goals, those strategic objectives, you need a strategic financial approach to all of this. And what that means is it's not just about how much money is in your bank account and how low of taxes you're going to pay. There's much more to this, and there's much more we need to be doing in order to ensure, kind of as we're sailing forward, we have the right structure, we have the right teams in place to really drive to whatever we're defining success as. Now, again, what does all this have to do with what we're talking about? The first thing I'd like to do is kind of focus a little bit on the role. This is kind of a little bit of a summary. Again, it's not our report, it's from Deloitte. I think it might be almost 15 years now, so it's continued to mature. And if I were to ask everyone here, and I'm not, tell me what a finance and accounting department does, I will get 20 answers, all of which will not align, and there will be no consensus as to what it is. And that's because there is no common definition of what does our finance and accounting team do? What should they deliver? What's their leadership responsible for? And so in its basic form, you might hear people say, well, Ryan, isn't it your job, make sure as much money comes in and as little money goes out because that's profitability? Yeah, we think about that, but there's a lot more to it than just that. I think traditionally what you'd see from an organization is along that left side there. And that's okay. But what's happening nowadays is we need more from the organization, and you're seeing a shift to the right, a shift to that more strategic focus and need from our teams, particularly with the complexity and our desire to do more. Now, as we're scaling and businesses grow, we need much more from this function. Many of us probably, if we've been in business at a start, we're just happy if we can close the books. And that's all right when you're a certain size. But as you begin to grow and as complexity grows and as you scale, you need a lot more from the function, and you need a lot more from it both supporting you for today and supporting you for where you want to go. So, raise of hands, how many people here have at least one person with at least one of these roles in their company on the left side? Okay. We're not going to talk that much about roles here, but I'm sure it's kind of familiar to you. We've worked with companies where it's us and a bookkeeper. We've worked with companies where it's us and 20 people on a finance team and jobs you don't even see there. And quite honestly, none of that really matters. What matters is you have to ensure you're doing everything on the right-hand side. We have to focus on the impact side of what's going on, regardless of the name title. I don't care if your bookkeeper can do all that. That's terrific. But you need to ensure all of that is occurring along the right-hand side there. So what does that mean in the end? We're often going to see those bottom three layers there, the tasks, somebody's doing it, right? We're collecting, we're paying bills, we're journaling entries, reports. I'm sure hopefully you're getting your closing out and you're getting a P&L at some point. And we're seeing those internal systems, maybe our ERP, our QuickBooks, other things we need to run. But we're not seeing those top three getting done in a lot of places. And it's not until someone really makes it a priority and realizes its importance that it gets done. And at that time, normally what happens is they realize the bottom three aren't really working well either. And that tends to be because one of two reasons. One, the bottom three were never really designed well to start with. And two, maybe they were designed when we were 1/5 the size and now we've completely outgrown them. I'm sure most people here can realize we don't love spending time redoing processes. You talked about the 80-20 rule on processes. It's a lot of effort just to get to the first 80%. Well, what about 2 years later? Those things, they're not static. They've changed. You've grown. Understanding that and understanding how that can impact you is important. And we've seen that. We've seen organizations that struggle paying their bills. And we see organizations struggle to bill. Why is that? Because 5 years ago, they had one person doing 6 steps to collect whatever they were due. Then it became 6 people doing 1 step. And then it became 6 departments doing 1 step. And it took them 4 weeks to get a bill out to their clients. And they lost a large Fortune 50 client who said, if you can't bill me fast enough, I'm not going to work with you anymore. And that happens. And this is where these things can manifest themselves if we're not thinking about it. And I'm not saying go run back and redo all your processes, but all these things build on each other and a lot of criticality around them as we look at it. Oh, sorry, there you go. You saw a flywheel earlier on EOS. I think ours looks prettier when you see it. We just talked a little bit about the function and the function of finance and accounting within it. And I now want to look at the impact. We talked about the EOS framework. We built our own. I'm not saying leverage ours. What I am saying is you need an approach. You need an approach to how you're going to approach finance and accounting to really drive you forward based on your definition of success. And they need to be a partner in that. Now, we chose the flywheel for 2 particular reasons. One, it gives you that sense of momentum. I mean, that's what a flywheel is. And if anything falls out of it, quite honestly, your momentum stops and these things build on each other. Second reason is flywheels are not checklists. It's not do this, and we're done. They are iterative and they build on each other. And so it's critical to make sure we remember it, that none of these things sit still, right? You know, I don't know if everybody here realizes it, but you know, whatever we're doing today, it's going to be a complete change in a year. Things will keep changing and our businesses need to respond to that. So this is the flywheel, and I was talking about it earlier. It's interesting because as we look at this, and as I said, I'm not going to really go into all the things on the slide. We promised I wouldn't bore everyone with a 40-minute talk on this. I just want to give you a general consensus of sort of what these all are and how they tie together and how they can be used to build that. And again, I'm happy to, offline, if anybody wants to dive a little into it and say, well, what did that mean? And where does something like that work? And are there tools for that? More than happy to share that with you. We could talk afterwards. We're happy to do that. But what this really comes down to is thinking about where we need to start and then where we go from there. That goals and that goals and strategy circle is bigger. It's not an optical illusion, and it's bigger on purpose because everything starts there. You're asking, what do finance and accounting people care about that? They care a lot about it. They should care a lot about it because that should drive everything that is happening in your company. We talked about your rocks and your vision. Say your knots. You do knots. Your knots and your vision. You know, vision tends to, from an EOS perspective, 5 years out, 3 years out, 1 year out, and the knots are getting you there in kind of quarterly increments. Well, what are those? What are we trying to become? Because everything else we do needs to support that. At revenue model, we're really talking about what is it, who do we serve, and how do we serve them, right? This is our target market and everything else. We need to understand that. That needs to support what we're doing from our goals and strategies perspective. Processes, this is everything. This is your banker. This is how you close. This is how you use your ERP, whatever it is. These, again, have to be built to support what you're trying to do. And often these get forgotten about. You know, we have old, antiquated solutions that have not kept up with what we're doing. These really need to capture what's most important. Now, everybody talks about reporting. We are awash in data. I'm actually asking everybody to prescribe to less. I can give you a whole bunch, but actually what matters and what we need to track is tracking the most important things that help us make decisions about the future and drive our decisions going forward. I'd rather you look at 5 to 10 things than a P&L every month, because all that's going to tell you is what's happened, not what's going to happen, and how you can influence that. Those things need to be driven back to what are your goals and strategies. We talked earlier about meeting a board member every week. That is a great KPI. That is absolutely, if that's an important thing, that matters. There's probably no other organization that has that as a rock and has that as a measurable, but for this organization, that matters, and it's unique to them. That's reporting. That's making sure you're able to gather that information in the right way. Now, he can do that on his own. He doesn't need a finance system to tell him how many meetings he's got scheduled. But in other things, if we've got to track sales, we've got to track where cash is or whatever that is, it's critical, and you need to make sure you're tracking that right information. And I think most people here have probably struggled with an ERP and argue and have to pull information out and play in spreadsheets just to get what they want. That's not really a system that's working to support what you're trying to do. Cash, look, it's about the lifeblood of our business, and probably most importantly, and the thing we see most often is nobody's forecasting it, nobody's managing it. If I ask people, do you have a 13-week cash flow? I'm not going to call anybody out here. 8 times out of 10, I get no. And it's critical because I think 90% of businesses go out of business because of cash flow, and probably more than that, but I think that's the new number. Understanding where you are, understanding what you need for what you want to do is critical, so you can course correct. So many businesses make very rash decisions because they have no idea where they are and what's coming up. You need to ensure that's in place. And finally, profitability. And again, for certain places, profitability is a different consideration. It's making sure you're measuring the right things. Do you know how you're profitable by product, by geography, by whatever it is you're trying to track? Because that's going to help you make those decisions on pricing and other things. And that's where, finance begins to work closely with people like sales and revenue and production and whatever else you're doing. They have to be working in concert. So in the end of this, what you need to ensure is that whoever is driving this, whether it's your leadership team, your CFO, your controller, whoever it is, they've got to make sure this wheel's spinning. They've got to make sure this is going around. They got to dive in and out to make sure the right things are going on and fixing what they need to do, and that it's built to support what you define as success. So that's really it. And I just, again, happy to cover more later and happy to answer anything in the Q&A, but just wanted to give everyone a sense of a framework. You can build your own, but please ensure you have one. Please ensure you're working on something, and that your finance and accounting team is really driven to support where you're going and is helping you look out over the horizon. So, thank you.
So before we open it up to questions for everybody, I do want to ask some discussion with Ryan so that we can talk about a few things, just to key on things that I realized I missed when I gave my presentation and what he hit on so much. You want to say something?
No, I'm just,
You're
sorry.
going to moderate. You're going to take the questions and everything, right?
Yes.
So before we open it up for that, it's interesting. You talked about 5 to 10 things to do rather than a P&L. Mm-hmm. We live and breathe by the P&L, doesn't everybody? Right? The P&L is the key factor of everything. What's it at the end of the month? And it's been really hard for me to adopt a system to find the right leading indicators to tell me whether or not at the end of the month I'm going to be in the red or the black. Because I don't really know until the month it comes, because there's so much, deferred revenue, deferred this, defer that, and it's like, everything at the NHLA is deferred for convention. So from January until October, I don't actually have a good plan of how much revenue and expenses are coming in for convention, because it's all deferred, and so my P&L doesn't reflect all that. And so those 5 to 10 things to look at, what are they? What do you look at? What, from a business perspective, give us a little bit of what should be.
Yeah, well, it definitely differs. I mean, there's certain key things based on certain industries, but obviously it's going to come back to what's most important to you. I would look in your situation and say, this is where P&Ls can be kind of messy, because it might be more important to you as cash, right? Great, your P&L might look a certain way, but if you've got cash in the bank and you're operating, so you know where that stands, so you know what you have on hand, that's kind of critical. And that's the funky thing with P&Ls, right? They get down to that, this is what's already happened, doesn't really help me with what's going forward. Certain organizations, service organizations, are always looking at things like profit per employee, right? I think that's a, critical thing. When you start looking at anybody who's working kind of in manufacturing, it's going to relate to inventory and some other items. Profitability is not something people know well, and I would, if you don't know your profitability, know it. And if you don't know your profitability down to specific things, such as, unit measures, anything you can cut it up by, that's critical. But then I would tell you what matters to your business, because an organization like yours may have it may mean something differently than what it does to you. And based on what you're trying to accomplish and where you're trying to go, those should be the numbers you're tracking. So if you said to me, I want to double membership, that is my number one priority for the year, I want to double membership, I'd say to you, maybe that is, okay, good guess. I would say to you, how are you accomplishing that? And you would say, well, we're going to hire 3 people, we're going to do more education, we're going to go put out all these things. I say, great, how do we know if we're doing that? How do we know if it works? And let's start measuring against that. So we've hired this, we expected for 100,000 in headcount per person that we would see 20 new members. How's that coming? That should be a return of whatever, $5,000 per member for each headcount. Are we getting that ratio? Is it working? That's the most important thing to you now. Are we getting that return that we expect? If we're not, what should we do? And if there's a pipeline, I don't assume you probably have a pipeline of potential. What does that look like? What's the conversion rate there? I know it's not a financial number, but that's probably a lot more important to you if membership drives it. I'd be looking at my pipeline and saying, if we know it's a month-long process and we convert 20%, are we filling that? Are we filling that the way we expect to do it? So I could spend all day telling you different numbers and what it could be, but it really comes down to what matters to you, and it's going to help you, because I think if you look at 100 numbers, you don't look at any. You have no idea what it's telling you, and you don't know what decision to make.
So 5 to 10 key numbers that indicate. Okay.
Yeah, you can do 12. I mean, that's all right. I'm just, I think what you find is we are awash in numbers. You can get thousands of bits of information, and there's so much, and people get overwhelmed. And don't forget, this is also about alignment across your team, so it's not just a number for you. So if everybody's looking at different things, are they all aligning back to what the big stuff we're trying to accomplish, right? I mean, I think we all know the conflicts that happen between finance and sales. We're kind of measured on different things. Sales is willing to sell. They're not normally worried about profitability. We're kind of worried about profitability. Sales wants to get that across and get their commission. So they're looking at revenue and I'm looking at profitability. 2 completely different numbers that 2 different groups in the company often are focused on. So how do we get everyone aligned to that to say what's good and if we know we're heading in the right direction?
Thank you. It's been interesting. NHLA has a unique, right? We do things that aren't profitable. That's why we're an association, right? If it was profitable for somebody to go out there and inspect lumber all the time or teach a grading school, then they'd be doing it for profit. But because it's not, we collect membership dues to offset that. And so for us, it's a very different model than for companies. And again, we don't create a widget. We have to provide a certain number of services, so it makes it very complicated. But it's still, I'm amazed how much there is similarity between manufacturing. I've been in the manufacturing business. I used to be a production supervisor for solder molding years ago, and I remember competing with the sales guys, as the sales guys sit there and promise what they could do, and then the production guys had to sit there and say, yeah, I got 5 molders, and they can't actually do that volume for that size, for that project, without doing this number of changeovers, and that requires this. And so, we all face that sales versus production difference. In the sales versus production world, how does a CFO view that alignment of sales and production for, when you talk about goals and priorities and things like 13-week cash flow and things like that, that's a constant battle between sales and production.
I think at first start, you got to involve them in the bigger picture. So you talked about you have your L10. Are there representatives from that involved in your broader meetings, and do they understand what success looks like for that? So in your role, it's defining what is success across that thing, and is everybody on the same page, understanding what that looks like and what we're doing? Again, selling stuff that isn't profitable doesn't help me. Selling something that we can't deliver for 8 weeks and then our reputation's harmed doesn't help me. All these things come together. So do we care about Net Promoter Score? Do we care about, again, how we're viewed? Do we care about current customers versus former customers? Like, what do we care about? And then what you normally would do is try to get them aligned on that, to say, great, I'm not going to compensate sales on revenue. I'm going to compensate them on profitability. I'm going to compensate them on, did they sell and we were able to deliver within a week? If that's what matters to us and that's what we're driving. That, again, that's an example. But I would get them together and say, this is success. if we do this, this is success, and this is what we're going to measure against, and you make sure they're on that, because then it's their job to trickle that down within the teams and make sure that everybody else is following that. And I believe in transparency. I know we can't share everything with all employees, but make everybody aware. Let everybody know what the goals are. Share with them that these are the 5 things we're trying to do. I guarantee you 80% of the new ideas are going to come from your staff. It's not going to come from your leadership team. Usually the staff has all the good answers because they're the one living it. So if you can make folks aware and you can make folks know that, hey, for us, these 5 things matter, but also these 3 things really matter for the company. They may have a great idea like, hey, yeah, you talked about going into a new market. You know, my wife actually works in so-and-so industry, and they've been selling into, all of a sudden maybe you've got it in, who knows? And that's just because you opened the kimono up and you shared where you're trying to go. And again, there's something with humans. We're only good at concentrating on like 7 things at one time. If you ask us to do a lot, and we can't really multitask. So I think that's where the smaller number matters. And then making sure everyone's aware of how we're defining it, and that they're not working in silos, kind of coming up with their own. And I would actually check, like, okay, sales, what are your goals? Okay, production, what are your goals? And do they measure up? Because if there's not, that has to be aligned.
Yeah, the NHLA's had a lot of problems working in silos, right? Inspection services silo, a marketing silo, and a school silo, and membership silos. And so we've had a lot of work to break down those silos and come as a better team. Will you advance back to Ryan's slide where he shows the funnel? I have one last question for you, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. There is, sorry, go this way. I want to show this one right here. So you have all these titles on here. You know, NHLA is very lean. There's the board of directors that tells me what to do. There's me, and then there's my chiefs, and then there's the doers.
Yep.
Not that the chiefs aren't doers. I don't mean to be, you know what I'm saying, though, but the management. So, you know, at best, you know, we have a very narrow funnel as you look at all these titles. And I'm sure for many of the members here, you know, they are the accountant, they are the controller, bookkeeper, probably forklift driver at the same time every once in a while. You know, they're doing other jobs. They're also going out on the production line and helping, and, you know, very narrow, small organizations. Having so many titles, is that a distraction? Is that a good thing? I mean, you sit there and said, well, if you can have one person do it all, that's great. But tell me about those roles and how you fight in a small organization, the priorities of all those different roles, because it is a big commitment to some of those things and the strategy that you talked about.
Well, I think it starts, again, I keep going back with, you know, what are you trying to accomplish and what matters? I mean, we're the same way. I mean, we only really have 10 people in our core. We have a lot of CFOs, but we only 10 people running the organization. So, you know, I wear a chief hat and I wear 5 other bottle washer hats and everything else. So we're all going through that. So it's going through. I do think there's also something to understand. We don't have unlimited resources. So do you have a sense when you're doing kind of right people, right seats, what we can expect from someone? Do we know resource availability and what we're able to get into? And then it's prioritizing, right? So I actually tell people, ignore the titles. I mean, ignore all of that. I'd actually focus more on the right side and say, which of these things do you need? Where do you need to be? And what's the right mix of this in your situation? And it's that balance, right, on resources, because it's always, right? So I'll give you an example. In our organization, one of the things we want to focus on is service management, which is because we deliver professional services. And it's a big deal. You want to retain clients. And they actually have a big choice to make with me. Do we want Ryan allocating time over here, or do we want him continue selling? Because I can't be in both places. And you have to have that discussion. You have to say, well, we got to make choices. We've got to make trade-offs. We've got to figure out which of these things matter most. Then I go back and prioritize it, right? You will have certain reporting, regulatory things you've got to do. You've obviously got to make sure those happen. You've got other things that may need to happen. But you may not be able to do certain of these things because it's just not there. But I think that's why you got to have the open conversation around resources, capability, and what you're able to do.
Thank you.
You may open up.
Yep.
All right. We'll go ahead and open it up for questions. Does anybody have a question for Dallin or Ryan, or both?
Desiree is my integrator, 100%. And she hasn't wanted that role for a long time. She's been very hesitant to take on that role because things have been a little bit fluid at the NHLA since I took over here. Just bringing a lot of change in, a lot of new things like getting government grants. And that means more work for her and for the team and for everybody on the finance side and what that means. And we've needed an integrator since I first read Traction, and then I read the book Rocket Fuel that talks about having a visionary who's, thinking at a high level. And I'm already on to the next 3 projects, and the staff here are still down here trying to implement the last idea that I had. That's like, oh wait, that one's already gone on to a new idea. Maybe we don't care about that. Let that one slide and let's do something else. And finding that balance. And so for us, having an integrator has been a need. Bucky's been pleading for it. You see him nodding his head, because it's like we recognize where our shortcomings are, right? In fact, Bucky said to me one time, he's like, Dallin, you're not a unicorn. And I took that very no, it was a good example to sit there and say, you don't do everything, right? You can't. Find the right people in the right roles and get the right people in that position. And that's been a big benefit to us. Desiree takes over that CFOO role, was to make her the official integrator to help us implement these things, to create the process, to have the structure, and to get the internal operations of the NHLA at a higher level. And it's made a difference.
Good, I commend you. It's not easy.
It isn't easy giving up control, right? And it's also not as easy managing managers. I'll be honest with you. So I've managed people before. I've managed a Molder crew of 50 people. I've managed association before with a staff of 4 or 5 people. But now I'm managing a manager of other people, and it became a more difficult process because I feel like I'm a really good manager and have a good relationship, but not all my managers have the same skills that I have or have different skills. And that's why we use the predictive index profiles to find out what their skills are. Because, okay, this person's an introvert. That means this person does this and this and this, and they're very thoughtful and need time to think about it and very analytical. But I don't care about the numbers. Just tell me you got the job done, and let's figure out if, at the end of the month, did we make money? That's all I care about. And it's like, no. We need these different seats, these different roles, these different personality types, so that we can make sure that everything's getting aligned. And recognizing that I can't do everything has been a good thing. And then getting my managers the tools to hold their people accountable, that's been a big help for us.
Do you mind if I ask you a follow-up question? Moving into that leader of leader roles or leader of managers roles, it's not just giving up control, it's giving up knowledge of what's going on. How's that been? Not knowing what everybody's doing all the time. How does that feel?
Brenda keeps sending emails to me and I ignore them.
Yep.
It's hard to give up knowledge. It really is. I want to have, being a visionary, I want to have a little bit of a control over everything. And I find letting, just turning things over to Natalie and Brennan. This is a good pipeline right here because I got my Chief Marketing Officer, Natalie Thielen. If you haven't met her yet, she's awesome. And Brenna, and using my team for all of our marketing efforts, I want to be involved and I have an opinion about the stupidest things. And they're like, Dallin, do you really care about the color of the font or this, that, or the other? And the answer is yes, I do care because I have my vision of how I want it to look, but I have to let it go. I have to let her do all that stuff and just say, okay, we don't need the national anthem this morning. We'll just sing it. So.
Did you hire a professional implementer?
I did. We needed the outside perspective just so that for those who haven't looked at the EOS model, they have implementers who come out and basically help facilitate the discussion of your chiefs and your leadership team. And bringing in the third-party person gave us an opportunity to have more open dialogue and pull out some of the entrenched prejudices and frustrations that the leadership team would have with each other. I mean, just being completely straightforward, right? The inspection services team wants to blame the marketing team for not selling enough of their services, and the marketing team wants to blame the inspection services team for not telling them what they're doing. And, so it always became this silos within the NHLA, and we had to break that down quite a bit. And so EOS and an implementer really helped us have those open discussions, allow conflict. We have to have some conflict in our meetings, and that means we have to be willing to speak up and say hard things, which you want to avoid the contention, but in the end, it actually has been good for the NHLA to be able to have an open relationship where everybody can say, hey, we don't like this. This needs to be improved, and we have to figure out a strategy together to improve it.
When you hire an implementer, they usually they'll come out and give a 390-day or 390-minute session. Right? So how long did you work with your implementer, or have you worked with the implementer? Was it just for a short period of time and you were kind of good to go on your own, or are you still working with them?
We had our last session with our implementer in August, or first of September was our last one. We've used her 4 times. So we had 4 quarterly meetings with her, and Desiree's taken over everything, and we'll maybe use the implementer once a year, but we're not using her anymore. So 4 sessions, basically every quarter, just to help us get the tools in place and to create that feedback loop. But it's been very helpful.
I was going to say, we used an implementer as well for 2 years. So came in, did that, went through 3 of the quarterlies, then the annual, and then for another, but we just finished with ours too back in March. So normally you'll see for a lot of them, and again, I don't want to speak for EOS, I'm not, but we do work with a lot of EOS companies, so we're kind of familiar. Kind of you get to the, particularly the 2-year spot, they're often looking for, implementers normally are not trying to like sit there for 5 years with organizations coming in, and there's usually a time frame to get them to where you can kind of run. And then they'll come in, they'll do this, they can do spot checks, they can do your annuals and things like that to help out. And I know they'll also coach they can coach your integrators as well.
I think Steve may have answered my questions with his questions, but we've tried to implement the EOS, and it's the time involved. We get this all organized, and then somebody doesn't show up here, we've got something that happened. How do you you talked about constantly changing your scorecards and all of the time and effort that you put in. How do you find the time to get all of that? Is it getting an implementer and then they say, this is what you have to do and this is how you have to do it?
No, the implementer doesn't do any of that. That's the sad part. You wish, like, I want the implementer to have a whip and like get things going, but it doesn't work that way. The implementer's there to move at your pace. And so you have to make the time. And Bucky, it's so hard because every business goes into survival mode, right? And the NHLA, I came into the NHLA and giving you some perspective. The first year we spent all of it working on strategic plan. And so we created a great strategic plan together. And then that was 2022 to 2023, and then things went downhill. And so all of a sudden we shifted into survival mode, right? We got to keep the finances going and do this and do this and do this. And we lost track. And I kept saying, hey, we need a process. We need to do this. And that's after the second year where we didn't make any progress on our processes and our action plans. That's when I went to Desiree and I'm like, we need something. That's when she came with traction. And so now we spent a year on traction. And even that, I wanted to move faster. All the staff are like, hey, it takes time to implement this. And I'm like, we've got to get it done because if we don't have the processes in place, if we don't have the scorecards, we don't know what we're doing. And so we make the time, and we've set it up every Monday that we have the meeting regardless of who's traveling or where we are, and we keep the dialogue going and we keep looking for improvements. And that's really where Desiree, who's got a great analytical mind and really a good integrator, who can really sit there and say, hey, we need a process for this and I can spell this out. And she wants a formula. She wants to be a robot. She wants to do things the same way every single time. And that's perfect because we need that structure to say, here's how we're going to prepare for a convention every single year. Here's how we're going to make sure we do it right. And it's been very helpful for us as the NHLA to get out of survival mode because it's so easy to go back into, hey, we're just trying to keep our head above water. Well, if you're treading water, you're not making any progress across the pool.
But I think it is good to have the time with the integrator because it forces everyone to go there for, in our case, the whole day. And you sit there and yes, it's your priorities, but that really helps you like, okay, we're going to work through the scorecard or we're going to do this or that. And everyone's in the same room. And I think then you're just kind of forced to do it versus trying to carve it out in your day to day. At least in the beginning, I think having that time together is what can really kick it off.
I think it also comes down to, do you want to be a tactical or strategic organization? Not doing something like this, most likely you're just going to end up doing day-to-day, put out fires all the time, and that's okay if that's what you want, but you're probably not getting where you want to go. And with anything, if you want to really be focused on the bigger changes, you've got to make a commitment to that. You've got to make a commitment to it mattering. Because if once a year I hear about our strategic plan and then hear nothing about it till a year later, guess what? I probably didn't focus on it much. I probably focused on everything else I was being bugged with every day. And I think for us, that was the important thing. It actually doesn't turn into much time. And we have our L10. I think I spend 30 minutes getting my numbers and prepping ahead of time. But I like it. I like the fact that every week I'm being reminded this one thing matters more than the 10 other things you're thinking about. Because if we do this one thing, it's going to get us, we're actually going to get to the end of the year and be profitable like the way we want to be. And that's, I think, also helping shift the mindset of everyone. Because otherwise, people are just going to come in and go and do their day work day in, day out, and just respond to whatever's coming up.
Absolutely. It drives the priorities. It makes you think, what am I supposed to get done this week? Oh, I have to do that. I'm going to go and make that a priority besides all the other things that I want to do.
I'm sorry, question, did you have ask a
Nope.
question? Oh. I'll
Have you used EOS? Have you looked at it?
Okay, full disclosure, Banks Hardwoods, father, daughter, first generation, second generation, founder, sort of kind of supposed visionary and integrator to begin with. Yeah, I just recently, and we're going to second generation. We recently formed a board of directors. I joined a peer group for chairman to learn how to do that. Been in that for a while. One of my meetings last year, one of my peers said, he mentioned this book Traction, and I asked about it, I read it, and I thought, this is perfect for us, because we're growing, we're going next gen, bringing Brady in, business is turning over in terms of workforce, we've got some older people who are gonna be sunsetting, we've got to recruit for the future, lots of moving parts, lots of things going on. Been doing it sort of my ready, fire, aim way for a long time. And so I thought it would be really great to start. The guy that recommended the book had a president of his company who was their integrator. And we had a conversation about EOS. As it turned out, he is now on our board of directors, and he's guiding us with that, particularly Brady. As it turns out, Brady, it just came into the company a year ago after a little bit of a hiatus, and she is actually a natural integrator. So father, D, daughter, I, that's all working out perfect, like your rocket fuel work there. And we're struggling with it because we've self-implemented, and we've tried to kind of do it our own hybrid way. We didn't do that off-site, which was mentioned earlier. We just kind of pieced it together, but we've made a lot of really fantastic progress, and we needed structure at Banks Hardwoods, managerial structure we've never had before. And I'm not putting on a pitch to everybody in the room, but it's been a fun adventure. It's been inspiring. I think it's going to help to drive our business forward. It's a great way for us to work together as a family, and it's interesting that the timing of when we got involved is about the same as yours, and I think it's a fantastic journey that you're on, and I certainly can appreciate it. So we got some more in common, and you're getting an integrator on your new board of managers, so that might be something more fun to talk about. I think this is a great, service or educational piece that NHLA has brought to this convention, and I hope that more companies will at least take the time to read the book and recognize the value of having the structure.
If you go into my office, you'll see I have like 2 bookshelves of all the business books forever. I love business books. I thrive on them. They're a great read. I'm right next to my science fiction and fantasy. This is the next best fantasy you can ever read, because everybody's got a different opinion on how to do everything, right? And they're complicated. These books Attraction is not a book that says, hey, this is how to run your business, this is not the perfect way to run a business. It's a model to say, hey, look at these things. Here's other books to reference. And so, there's a lot of other systems and processes out there, but this is really simple, just to say, here's a framework, and you can go do all these other things, and you can read all these other books, good to best, and all. There's a million other books out there, and I really like Patrick Lencioni and all the books that he writes and different things like that. But it's about getting the core structure in place and then utilizing that. I love it that you talked about in your one slide where you're like, there's the one is bigger, right? The goals and strategies was bigger. Absolutely, right? When it comes down to the end of the day, that's what's driving the NHLA. Our goal is to grow and stabilize the hardwood industry. We focus on that all the time. Are these strategies helping us do this? No. Okay, how can we change? How can we improve it? How can we make sure that we're aligned with what this is? Because if we're not on that goal and strategy part, that's a big, hey, we're missing the boat. We're not doing something that's really going to help the association.
And I think actually what I hear from you, you're talking about the growth and some of the change coming. It's embracing the what got us here won't get us there, right? There is change. There's things going on. Generations change, processes change, technology change. buying behaviors change, tariffs change, you name it, it's constant change. So what are we doing to get in front of that? And I think whatever it is, you need an approach. You need to be committed to your approach. Whether it's EOS, whether it's others, that's fine. Whether it's one you build yourself and that works, great. Because otherwise it's basically roughshod. Otherwise it's everybody making it up on their own, figuring out what's right. And it's me interpreting what I think you want versus me knowing what you want and me knowing how we're aligned. I used to work in global organizations, and one of the things I did, I would hit 10 of our sites every year. The first thing I'd ask them is like, what do you think what's the number one thing the board asks us for? 10 different answers, nobody knew. I'm like, well, this is a problem. We're not on the same page. We're not rowing in the same direction. We've got to start. If we don't start there, that person thinks this gets back to your finance versus sales, right? That person thinks this is important, so that's what they're driving. That's how silos get created. I think that's where knowing that and putting something in place to ensure this doesn't happen is critical.
As for you, Brady, I will say this. The best thing about having an integrator is being able to sit there and say, okay, go do this, and I'll go do my own thing and get ready. But the worst thing is Desiree has the trump card. So when she sits there and says, Dallin, we can't do that, or Dallin, no, she has the trump card. I have to listen to her, which makes Natalie really happy. Because, I have to give her the ability to be the decision maker for what's best for the organization. Yes, I have a vision. Great, we can work on that, but here's our priorities, and we have to keep the priority moving forward first. And we can take that vision into account. We'll figure out something, but here's what the team can do at this point. And giving her the final, yes, you have that authority. I'm giving up authority to her to make those decisions and to tell me, you can't do that, Dallin. That's hard because I really want to be in control of everything. That's my predictive index profile, by the way. It's like, hey, I'm a captain. I want to be, guiding the ship all the time. And letting her have veto power over my ideas is hard to, I have great ideas.
I kind of look. Well, it's funny because I kind of look at that and I view ideas as the top of the iceberg, but the execution is the 90% under the water of the iceberg. That actually has to get done because ideas are great, but a lot goes into things. And usually I found that it's 10 times the work you expect it to be when it comes to doing whatever you need to do. And that's the focus on execution that an integrator does is so critical.
All right, we're at 2:30. Do we have any other questions?
Was this helpful?
All right, well, thank y'all for attending. If you haven't done so already, please scan that QR code so we can get some feedback. And thank you, Dallin and Ryan. And